"Hey, old woman, hold still! What the hell are you doing here at this hour?" Donovan's voice rang out abruptly, rude and suspicious, breaking the stillness of the evening. Eleanor looked up, her kind eyes narrowing in the direction of the voice. She was a little surprised to see a policeman approaching her with an unfriendly attitude. "Good evening, officer. What's the matter?" "I'm just tending to these roses," she replied politely, though she felt a little confused. "Tending to roses?" Donovan sneered, a sneer of contempt. He stopped a few feet away, his eyes scanning the old woman's head and toe, lingering meaningfully on her dark skin and plain clothes. "You don't look like someone who lives in this upscale neighborhood, do you? You must be a maid who sneaks out while her boss is away to do something shady, right?" The racial slur was unabashed. Eleanor frowned, deeply offended. She had lived here with her son for several months, and while she might not have dressed in the silks of the other ladies in the neighborhood, she did not deserve to be treated like this. "Officer, I am not a maid. This is my son Marcus Vance's house, and I live with him. I have a right to be here." "Your son, Marcus Vance?" Donovan repeated the name suspiciously. "Here in Willow Creek Estates? Don't make this up." He moved closer, his tone becoming more arrogant. "Where's your identification? Show me. Let's see if you're really someone's mother or just a phony vagrant." "I was in my own yard, and I didn't have my wallet or identification with me," Eleanor replied, her voice starting to harden a little at the unfair treatment. "And I have no obligation to show you my papers when I've done nothing wrong. Tell me, what legitimate reason would you have for stopping me and asking me such unreasonable questions?" Eleanor's calm, clear-headedness, and the questioning of her reason added fuel to Donovan's simmering anger. He was a prejudiced man who felt insecure and threatened by people of color, especially when they appeared intelligent or stood up for their rights. He felt his police authority was being challenged by an old black woman. "Because I doubt you!" Donovan shouted, his face red, his right hand already gripping the butt of his gun. "You're being defiant! You're hiding something!" He saw Eleanor instinctively take a step back as he approached, her hand perhaps raised slightly to shield him. To Donovan, in his state of tension and blind prejudice, the action was interpreted as a threat. "Freeze! Drop your weapon!" he roared irrationally, though it was clear that Eleanor had no weapon in her hand other than a small pair of pruning shears. Eleanor froze, completely confused by the officer's unreasonable order and aggressive attitude. She opened her mouth to explain, to say that she was unarmed, but she no longer had the chance. In a moment of madness, driven by unfounded fear, racial prejudice, and uncontrolled anger, Officer Michael Donovan pulled his Glock pistol from its holster. Bang! A single gunshot rang out, sharp and dry, tearing apart the quiet of Willow Creek Estates. The bullet struck Eleanor Vance in the chest. Her eyes widened in horror and disbelief. She staggered back a few steps, then collapsed onto the lush green lawn, right next to the crimson rose bushes she had so carefully tended. Blood began to ooze from the wound on her chest, staining her purple sweater. Officer Donovan stood there, stunned for a moment, looking at the old woman's lifeless body and the smoking gun in his hand. What had he done? Panic began to take over his mind. He looked around, saw a few windows of nearby houses open, a few figures peeking out. Screams began to ring out. "Oh my God! Gunshots! Someone's been shot! Call 911 now!" Donovan was startled. He had to do something. He quickly put the gun back in its holster, then pulled out his walkie-talkie, stammering a report to the center. "Center, this is car 54. There was a shooting at the address. Subject is acting threateningly. I was forced to shoot in self-defense. Request an ambulance and immediate support." He began to make up a story to cover up his terrible act. But the truth cannot be hidden forever. The fatal gunshot not only took the life of a gentle, innocent mother, but was about to cause a legal and political earthquake that shook the entire city, because the victim was not just an ordinary old black woman. She was Eleanor Vance, the mother of federal prosecutor Marcus Vance. The wail of police and ambulance sirens quickly shattered the quiet of Willow Creek Estates. Within minutes, the small street in front of Marcus Vance's house was blocked off by yellow tape and a heavy Maplewood police presence. Red and blue lights flashed in the twilight, creating a chaotic and mournful scene. Paramedics rushed from the ambulance to where Eleanor Vance lay motionless on the grass. After a few minutes of quick examination, they shook their heads sadly. She had died at the scene from a gunshot wound to the chest, causing severe damage to her heart and lungs. Her body was temporarily covered with a white sheet, awaiting the arrival of the forensic team. The crime scene was heavily guarded by police officers. Detective David Miller, a veteran of the Maplewood Police Department's Major Crime Unit, was assigned to the initial investigation. He conducted his work methodically. He ordered photographs of the crime scene from multiple angles, marked the location of shell casings found near where Donovan stood, seized Donovan's murder weapon for ballistics testing, and took preliminary statements from witnesses. Officer Michael Donovan, the shooter, was immediately removed from the scene and placed in isolation in another patrol car, as is standard procedure for officer-involved shootings. When Detective Miller arrived to take his initial statement, Donovan appeared distraught, but continued to cling to his story of self-defense. I was on patrol and saw her acting suspiciously in the yard," Donovan stammered, his voice shaking. "I went up to her and asked for her papers, and she was hostile and reached into her pocket as if to get a weapon. I saw something shiny. I felt like my life was in danger and I had to shoot in self-defense, Detective. I had no choice." He tried to make the story seem more favorable to him, but the panic and inconsistencies in his testimony were not lost on Detective Miller's expert eyes. Meanwhile, other officers interviewed neighbors who had witnessed the incident or heard the gunshots. Their accounts were almost unanimous. They heard the officer yelling loudly before the shots rang out. Some saw Eleanor simply gardening, not appearing dangerous or threatening in any way. One neighbor insisted that she was holding only small pruning shears, which could not have been a weapon. These accounts clearly contradicted Donovan's story of self-defense. Most importantly, the data from Donovan's body cam was immediately seized and sealed. Detective Miller knew that this video would be the most important and objective evidence to clarify the truth. He asked the technical department to prioritize processing and analyzing this data. The next step in the investigation was to identify the victim and notify her next of kin. Detectives were sent inside the large house to search for the elderly woman's identification. In the guest bedroom on the first floor, they found Eleanor's wallet, which contained an old driver's license, a social security card, and several family photos. The name on the papers identified her as Eleanor Vance, 72. In her phone book or notebook, they found her son's emergency contact information, Marcus Vance, along with his address and phone number. One detail that caught the detective's attention was the office address listed next to Marcus Vance's name, United States Attorney's Office. Detective Miller frowned at this information. Federal prosecutor? Was there a coincidence here? He decided to make the difficult call himself. He dialed the office number listed in the notebook. After a few rings, a deep, professional, and confident male voice came on the other end of the line. U.S. Attorney's Office, Vance speaking. How may I help you? Detective Miller's heart skipped a beat. Vance? U.S. Attorney Vance? He glanced back at the victim's name on the paperwork. Eleanor Vance. Same last name as Vance. Impossible. He tried to keep his composure, cleared his throat. Excuse me for disturbing you. Excuse me. Am I speaking to Federal Attorney Marcus Vance? He asked again, cautiously. Yes. This is Marcus Vance. What's up, Detective? Marcus Vance's voice remained professional as usual, but there was a hint of surprise and doubt when he heard the person on the other end of the line identify himself as a detective. Detective Miller took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. This was probably the most difficult call of his entire investigative career. "Sir, Attorney Vance, this is Detective David Miller, Maplewood Police Department. I regret to have to bring you some very sad news." He paused, trying to find the right words. "There was a shooting just moments ago at your residence in Willow Creek Estates." "Shooting? At my house?" Marcus Vance's voice was tense and urgent. "Is anyone hurt? Is my mother home?" Detective Miller felt his throat dry. "Sir, the victim of the shooting was an elderly woman named Eleanor Vance." He hesitated. "She did not survive, sir. I am so sorry." There was complete silence on the other end of the line, a silence that lasted for a few seconds but felt like an eternity, more terrifying than any scream or cry. Detective Miller could hear the heavy, rapid breathing on the other end of the line. Then Marcus Vance spoke, his voice hoarse with pain and shock, barely a whisper but still managing to maintain incredible control. "My mother, Eleanor Vance, is my real mother." He repeated it as if to confirm the terrible truth that had just come crashing down on him. What the hell happened, Detective? Who did this?" Detective Miller felt a chill run down his spine. He knew this was no longer a typical police shooting. It had become a high-profile case involving a relative of one of the most powerful law enforcement officials in the area. "Sir, this is an ongoing investigation. It involves one of our officers, Officer Michael Donovan." Before he could finish, Marcus Vance interrupted, his voice now icy, laced with pent-up rage. "Donovan, Michael Donovan, I'll be there in a moment." The call ended abruptly. News that the shooting victim was the mother of U.S. Attorney Marcus Vance spread like wildfire through the Maplewood Police Department. Chief Davis, upon receiving Detective Miller's report, paled. He knew his department was on the brink of an unprecedented crisis. The pressure from the Justice Department, the FBI, the media, and the public's outrage would be overwhelming and potentially devastating. Officer Michael Donovan, the perpetrator, was in custody at the department and immediately placed under special surveillance. When he learned the true identity of the victim, his initial arrogance and defenses completely evaporated, replaced by extreme fear and a belated realization of the terrible consequences of racial bigotry and abuse of power. He knew that this time, he would not get away with it. Immediately after receiving news of the tragic shooting involving U.S. Attorney Marcus Vance's mother, the federal investigative machinery was set into motion at breakneck speed. The U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., immediately directed the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, to officially take over the case from the Maplewood Police Department. The reason was obvious. The victim was an immediate relative of a high-ranking federal justice official, and the case had extremely clear signs of a federal civil rights violation. An elite team of investigators from the FBI's Civil Rights Unit, led by Special Agent in Charge Sarah Jenkins, a woman known for her sharpness, experience, and uncompromising stance on police abuse, was dispatched to Maplewood that night. They took over the entire crime scene, initial records, and physical evidence from the local police department. While there was some coordination, it was clear that the FBI was the lead agency and had the final say in the investigation. The FBI's first and most important job was to analyze the data from Officer Michael Donovan's body camera. This was considered the objective and central piece of evidence in the case, capable of revealing the entire naked truth behind the fatal shot. Video and audio analysts at the FBI's Quantico lab worked tirelessly to restore and decode every detail of the video. And what the video captured was truly shocking and outrageous, completely refuting Donovan's initial self-defense testimony. Unnecessary approach. The video shows Donovan deliberately stopping his car and approaching Eleanor Vance as she was peacefully gardening in her yard without any signs of suspicion or danger. Arrogant and insulting. The audio clearly captures Donovan's arrogant and disrespectful tone from the start. Nosy questions. What are you doing here? Swing. Where are your papers? And racial and social slurs. Not from around here. Made, shady, are all captured. The victim's calm and reasonable resistance. In contrast, the video shows that Eleanor Vance remained calm and polite, despite being clearly offended. She answered questions clearly, explained that she was at her son's house, and demanded to know the reason for her detention in a completely legal manner. There was no provocative or defiant action or word on her part. Donovan's unreasonable escalation. When confronted by Eleanor and asked for a legitimate reason, the video shows Donovan becoming angry and losing control. He kept shouting and making unreasonable demands. The unprovoked shooting. The most important part of the video is the moment Donovan yells, "Drop your weapon." While Eleanor is clearly unarmed, her hand is either in her sweater pocket or raised in a defensive reflex. Almost immediately after that yell, Donovan pulls out his gun and shoots her in the chest from close range, without hesitation, without any indication that he actually felt his life was in danger. The action happened so quickly, so decisively, showing a complete loss of control and possibly premeditated intent to use force. The body cam video became irrefutable, ironclad evidence, exposing all the lies in Donovan's initial testimony and exposing the true face of his abuse of power, racial prejudice, and irresponsible, brutal shooting. In addition, the FBI also re-interviewed all the neighborhood witnesses. Their testimony further reinforced what was recorded from the body cam. They all confirmed that Mrs. Eleanor was a gentle person, never quarreled with anyone, and at the time of the incident, she was just peacefully gardening. They also clearly heard Donovan yelling before the gunshots rang out. A detailed autopsy by the federal medical examiner also confirmed that Eleanor died from a single gunshot wound to the chest at close range, causing severe damage to her vital organs. No weapon was found on her body. A pair of small pruning shears was found nearby on the ground and could not be mistaken for a deadly weapon. The FBI also conducted a deeper investigation into Michael Donovan's background and work history. They discovered that, although he had never been disciplined severely, Donovan had received numerous complaints from members of the public, mostly people of color or other minorities, about his rudeness, discriminatory behavior, and use of unnecessary force in low-level situations. However, these complaints were often dismissed or handled lightly at the internal level of the Maplewood Police Department. This indicated an alarming pattern of behavior and a failure of the previous oversight system. As the federal investigation continues with urgency and vigor, U.S. Attorney Marcus Vance, who is grieving the loss of his mother, tries to maintain his position. He cannot directly intervene in the investigation due to a clear conflict of interest. All work related to the case will be handled by his senior colleagues at the Department of Justice and the Office of Special Counsel. However, with his position and prestige, Marcus Vance still closely followed every step of the investigation. He had frequent confidential discussions with the Attorney General and FBI Special Agent in Charge Jenkins, ensuring that all necessary resources were mobilized, every aspect of the case was clarified, and justice was carried out in the strictest manner. He appeared in public only once, at a brief press conference held a few days after the tragedy. With a sorrowful face but a firm voice, he read a short statement, expressing the immense pain of his family, praising his late mother as a kind, loving woman who always believed in justice. He also expressed his faith in the legal system he was serving, demanding a thorough, fair, and uncompromising investigation into the person who caused his mother's unjust death. He emphasized that this incident was not only a tragedy for his family, but also a painful reminder of the senseless police violence and the specter of racism that still haunts American society. His statement, full of emotion, but also very measured and professional, caused strong emotions and received widespread sympathy and support from the public. Meanwhile, Michael Donovan, faced with experienced FBI agents and the undeniable evidence from his own body cam, had completely collapsed. His initial defense had been shattered. He could no longer deny or fabricate. Under the terrible pressure, he may have panicked, had a mental breakdown, or even stubbornly blamed the circumstances, the victim's provocation, in vain. Whatever his final reaction was, the truth about his brutal actions and dark motives had been completely exposed to the light. The FBI investigation had gathered enough evidence to build the strongest possible indictment, preparing for an upcoming historic trial. After a comprehensive FBI investigation concluded, with irrefutable evidence of Michael Donovan's unjustified shooting, abuse of power, and racially motivated killing of Eleanor Vance, the U.S. Attorney's Office made a historic and shocking decision to prosecute the former police officer on the most serious charges and pursue the maximum penalty under the law, the death penalty. This decision was not made lightly. It reflects the extreme gravity of the case, the public outrage, and perhaps the unique status of the victim as the mother of a federal prosecutor. The Justice Department wanted to send the strongest possible message that the brutal and unlawful killing of citizens by law enforcement officers will never be tolerated and must be punished to the fullest extent possible. To ensure objectivity and avoid any potential conflicts of interest involving Marcus Vance, the Department of Justice has appointed a special federal prosecutor, Ms. Amanda Holloway, to lead the prosecution team in this case. Ms. Holloway is a veteran attorney known for her sharpness and extensive experience in complex civil rights and death penalty cases. She is given full authority to determine the prosecution strategy and present the case in court. The formal indictment against Michael Donovan filed in U.S. District Court includes the most serious charges. 1. Deprivation of civil rights under law, causing death. This is a core federal crime, focusing on the intentional violation of Eleanor Vance's rights to life, security, and freedom from excessive force, committed by Donovan while on duty and resulting in her death. This crime, in extreme cases, can be prosecuted with the death penalty. 2. Use of a deadly weapon. During the committing of a crime of violence, an additional federal charge, often associated with violent crimes involving guns, that can result in additional prison sentences. Third-degree murder. Under the criminal law of the state where the crime occurred, focuses on the intentional killing of a person without premeditation, unlike first-degree murder. The combination of federal and state charges ensures the best possible conviction. Michael Donovan's trial in the federal courthouse became an event that attracted national and international attention. Domestic and foreign media sent reporters to cover the case. The courtrooms were always packed with attendees, including representatives of civil rights organizations, social activists, families of the victims, families of the defendants, and a large number of interested members of the public. Security at the courthouse was tightened to an unprecedented level. Marcus Vance, though not part of the prosecution team, was present in court as the victim's son. He sat quietly in the front row of the family, his face hard with grief, but his eyes steady as the proceedings unfolded. His presence, a powerful federal prosecutor watching the trial of his mother's killer, was a haunting image, a constant reminder of the tragedy and the urgent need for justice. The trial lasted for weeks, with the presentation of evidence and heated debate between the two sides. Led by Amanda Holloway, the prosecution team presented a powerful and compelling case. They began by playing Donovan's body cam video, the central, irrefutable piece of evidence. Holloway analyzed every second, every word, every action in the video, exposing Donovan's senseless escalation, his aggressive demeanor, his disparaging remarks, and finally his cold, unprovoked shooting. She called in witnesses from the neighborhood to testify, confirming Eleanor's gentleness and harmlessness and what they had seen and heard that fateful afternoon. Forensic experts presented the results of the autopsy, confirming the cause of death and refuting any possibility of self-defense on Donovan's part. Social psychologists and criminologists were called in to analyze implicit racial bias and police stress syndrome, but stressed that these factors could not justify the act of shooting and killing. Mrs. Holloway painted a heartbreaking picture of a beloved mother and grandmother unjustly murdered in her own backyard by the very person who was supposed to protect her. She highlighted the brutality and inhumanity of the crime, the betrayal of public trust, and asked the jury to deliver a fair verdict that reflected the seriousness of the crime. Michael Donovan's defense team faces a daunting task. They cannot deny that Donovan shot and killed Eleanor. Their main strategy is to try to reduce the murder charge to manslaughter or to try to dismiss the federal civil rights element that could result in the death penalty. They tried to argue that Donovan had acted in a state of panic, misjudging the threat due to work pressure and the complex security situation of the area. They tried to focus on the detail of Eleanor putting her hand in her pocket as an action that raised suspicion, even though the video clearly showed it was just a natural reflex. They put Donovan on the witness stand to show remorse. Donovan cried, talked about psychological pressure, about vague fears. But his testimony was difficult to hold up under the sharp questioning of prosecutor Holloway and the solid evidence from the body cam. They also tried to find any flaws in the initial police or FBI investigation to shake the case, but apparently failed. Closing arguments. Prosecutor Holloway concluded her presentation with an emotional but also powerful plea for justice for Eleanor Vance and her family, and the need to send a message of zero tolerance for violence and racism in the police force. She asked the jury to have the courage to make a verdict based on the facts and conscience, no matter how difficult it may be. After days of attentive listening to presentations and hours, even days, of tense deliberation behind closed doors, the 12-member federal jury finally reached a unanimous decision. They returned to the courtroom with solemn faces. The air in the courtroom was thick, so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Michael Donovan stood there, his face pale, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. Marcus Vance sat in the front row, eyes closed, waiting for the final verdict on the man who took his beloved mother. The foreman of the jury stood up, holding the verdict paper in his hand, his voice clear and solemn as he spoke. On the charge of deprivation of civil rights under law causing death, we, the jury, find the defendant Michael Donovan guilty. On the charge of use of a deadly weapon in the commission of a crime of violence, we, the jury, find the defendant Michael Donovan guilty. On the charge of murder in the second degree, we, the jury, find the defendant Michael Donovan guilty. The verdict was in. Michael Donovan was found guilty of all the most serious charges. He staggered, almost collapsing if not for his lawyer. A chorus of sobs erupted from his family. Marcus Vance opened his eyes, a single tear rolling silently down his strong cheek. Justice was at hand. Following the jury's guilty verdict, the Michael Donovan trial enters its most intense and unique phase, the sentencing phase, where the jury will have to make a final decision on the former police officer's punishment: life in prison, without parole, or the death penalty. This is a complex and emotional legal process that requires careful consideration of aggravating and mitigating factors as defined by federal law. Finally, after many hours of careful deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous decision. They returned to the courtroom with solemn faces. The jury foreman rose and read aloud their final recommendation. We, the jury, having considered all the evidence and the aggravating and mitigating factors, unanimously recommend the sentence of death for the defendant Michael Donovan. The final verdict was delivered: the death penalty. The courtroom held its breath. Michael Donovan stood there, his face ashen, his legs shaking as if they were about to give way. He knew his fate was sealed. A few days later, in the final formal sentencing hearing, the presiding federal judge, after considering the jury's recommendations and the federal laws, solemnly read the final verdict. He reiterated the particularly serious nature of the case, the brutality of the crime, the betrayal of public trust, and the need for a proportionate sentence to ensure justice and deterrence. "Michael Donovan," the judge said, his voice echoing throughout the courtroom, "for the crimes you have committed, for the flagrant violation of civil rights and the taking of the life of an innocent citizen under the guise of law, the United States District Court, upon the recommendation of the jury, hereby sentences you to." He paused one last beat, then declared loudly, "Death penalty." The death sentence was pronounced. Michael Donovan collapsed on the spot, completely devastated. His family sobbed in anguish. Marcus Vance sat in the front row, eyes closed, hot tears rolling down his cheeks. Justice had been served to the fullest extent, but the pain of losing his mother was irreparable. Donovan was handcuffed and led out of the courtroom in heavy silence by U.S. Marshals. He would begin the long and uncertain journey down the Corredor de la Muerte to a maximum security federal prison, awaiting the day of his final sentence for his unforgivable crimes. The death penalty sentencing of Michael Donovan has sparked a national debate, reflecting the complexity and sensitivity of capital punishment in modern America. But for the victim's family, for the Black community, and for many others outraged by police violence and racism, it is a necessary and proportionate act of justice for the crime committed. It affirms that no one, not even the police, should be above the law and take the lives of others without cause. After the trial ended, Marcus Vance may have made a final statement to the media. He expressed his deep sorrow for the loss of his family, but also affirmed his faith in the legal system and hoped that this harsh sentence would serve as a strong warning, contributing to the promotion of substantive changes in law enforcement to prevent similar tragedies from happening in the future. He may spend the rest of his career and life tirelessly fighting for criminal justice reform, fighting against racism, and protecting civil rights for all. Michael Donovan's case has become a case study in police academies and law schools across the country, a painful reminder of the terrible consequences of bias, abuse of power, and failure to control force. The Maplewood Police Department and many other law enforcement agencies are facing intense pressure to reform, change their organizational culture, increase oversight, and rebuild community trust. The tragic shooting at Willow Creek will forever be an indelible scar on the city's history and a wake-up call for an entire nation. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you like this content, please click like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful stories, because tomorrow we will have another meaningful story for you.